He is the world's most famous cyclist, dominating his sport like no one before or since. Yet his reputation has forever been tarnished by a scandal that tore at the very fabric of professional cycling, pitting the sport's elite against one another. The doping scandal, however, was just one in a series of mountain-like obstacles that have confronted Lance Armstrong. The story of how he has overcome them is one of perseverance, tenacity, and self-belief. And in this week's Biographics, we explore the tumultuous life of Lance Armstrong. Lance Edward Armstrong was born as Lance Gunderson in Texas on September 18, 1971. His mother Linda was just 17 years old and a high school dropout, while his biological father, Eddie Gunderson, was a route manager for the Dallas Morning News. The marriage was an unhappy one, with Eddie proving to be abusive and neglectful. They divorced when Lance was only 2 years old. Before long, Linda, she had remarried, and Lance's stepfather was a traveling salesman named Terry Armstrong. Armstrong was a stern, distant man who never really bonded with Lance during his formative years. Terry's job kept him away from home a lot, and when he was home, he proved to be a harsh disciplinarian who would beat Lance with a paddle for any sort of incursion. Not surprisingly, the boy looked forward to his stepfather's work trips when it was just him and his mother at home. As the years progressed, the family's finances improved and they moved to better neighborhoods. They ended up in Richardson, where Linda signed up young Lance for swimming lessons. She also bought him a bicycle. Young Lance was an active, inquisitive child. He often got into fights, with one scuffle getting him kicked off the school bus, after which he rode his bicycle to school. He had a love of competitive sports, though he never really clicked with football, which was the dominant sport in Texas. Instead, he became passionate about running and swimming. Lance had an abundance of energy. His favorite TV show was The $6 Million Man, and he loved nothing better than to run around the neighborhood pretending to be the Bionic Man as he chanted the words of the show's theme song: better, stronger, faster. From Richardson, the Armstrongs moved to Plano, Texas, where Linda's new job as a telecommunications company secretary enabled them to buy their first house. It was here that they lived through the bulk of Lance's schooling. He attended the Armstrong Middle School, Williams High, and Plano East High. Linda bought her son his first serious bike when he was 7 years old. It was a Schwinn Mag Scrambler BMX racing bike. The bike, along with a helmet and safety gear, cost 3 times what Linda was hoping to spend, but she saw the value in getting her son involved in an outdoor sport. Lance rode his Scrambler until he was 13, when his mother bought him a Mercier road bike. Lance's competitive career began at just 12 years old when he competed in the Plano Swim Club Champs. He saw some success, but a year later he saw a poster for a triathlon and decided to switch to the 3-discipline event. His first triathlon was the Iron Kids, which he won pretty handily. With his stepfather often absent from the home, Lance lacked a strong male role model during his formative years. That role was filled in his early teens by Chris McCurdy, his Plano swimming coach. McCurdy trained Armstrong right through middle school and high school and encouraged him to compete on a national level and even to set his sights on the Olympics. Another man who took an interest in the teenage Lance was the owner of a local bicycle shop, and his name was Jim Hoyt. He gave the Armstrongs discounts on equipment, and Lance managed to earn some money riding for the events that were sponsored by Hoyt. When Lance was 14, he competed and won his first duathlon, consisting of swimming and running. The prize was a $100 pair of Avia running shoes. However, when the shoes arrived in the mail, they did not fit. The sales rep who came to the Armstrong home with a replacement pair, Scott Eder, ended up taking Lance under his wing and taking him to workouts and competitions. Eder took Lance to the Cooper Institute in Dallas when the boy was 16. The researchers there tested his VO2 max, which came out at 79.5%. It was the highest that they had ever seen. This meant that Lance had an incredible ability to make use of every breath of oxygen that came into his body. The testing also showed that he had the highest lactic acid threshold that they had ever come across. Through his formative years, Lance had a knack for getting himself into quite a bit of trouble. He and his mates would sneak into the neighbor's house and steal beer from the fridge. On one occasion, he and another boy glued the mailbox of a man who they had argued with. The police eventually came calling when he stole an Armstrong Street sign as an ornament for his room. When he was 16, however, his mother told him that she was planning on leaving his stepfather. She urged Lance to stop getting into trouble as she wouldn't be able to handle the stress that it would bring to her. Lance responded, channeling all of his energy into his sporting events. Lance and Linda now spent most weekends together, traveling to 10K running events and triathlons that he competed in. During the week, Lance spent many hours going on long rides with his cycling buddies. Linda helped her son to seek out sponsors who would supply such things as shoes and jerseys. Every single sponsor received a handwritten letter of thanks from Lance. So there are 4 competitive cycling categories. All riders start out at Cat 4. For Lance, this meant Tuesday night criterion rides at the local bike mart. It wasn't long before he moved up to Cat 3, where he found himself training with a couple of Cat 1 guys. When he was 16, Lance was riding his Mercier racing bike along the Dallas countryside when he was apparently run off the road by a truck driver. A furious Lance cursed at the driver from the asphalt. This caused the man to see red, and he stopped his truck and got out in a rage. Lance jumped to his feet and took off, but the man trashed his bike. Before he left, Lance managed to record his number plate. Linda proceeded to sue this man and win. She used the money to buy her son a new rally bike with racing wheels. Lance's new bike, though, didn't last long. Not long after receiving it, he was hit by an SUV while running a yellow light. He was thrown over the handlebars and onto the hood of the SUV. He was lucky to get away alive, especially since he wasn't wearing a helmet. He turned up at the hospital with a twisted foot, some scrapes, and a concussion. With his foot laced with stitches and a heavy brace, Lance's doctor told him to do nothing for the next 3 weeks. But there was just one problem. He had a triathlon race in 6 days. The doctor simply told him to forget about it. Instead, he got rid of the brace on the second day, cut out the stitches himself with a nail clipper, and turned up on the starting line that Saturday. He led the swim and the ride, eventually coming in third. When he heard about it, the doctor who had treated him, he could hardly believe it. By the time of his final year in high school in 1989, Lance was a national-level cycling competitor. He had qualified to train with the junior national team at Colorado in preparation for the World Junior Championships. Throughout his high school years, Lance had missed a lot of school due to his traveling around the countryside to compete. The school, however, had viewed the absences as being on par with playing hooky. They told him that he did not have leave to go to Colorado or indeed to follow on to Moscow to compete in the World Championships. The fact that cycling wasn't even recognized as a sport by Texas high schools at the time certainly factored into their decision-making. More was to come, though. Despite his working overtime to meet the requirement, a meeting was called where Lance and his mother were told that he would not be able to graduate with his class that year. They didn't care that he was an emerging elite athlete with an unprecedented opportunity to advance his career. To them, Lance, he was simply a slacker. Linda soon got her son into a private school that would let him graduate. The teachers at the new school, Bending Oaks Academy, were happy to work around Lance's schedule to help him complete his schooling. Armstrong's fierce competitiveness brought him to the attention of the coach of the US national cycling team, Chris Carmichael. Carmichael later noted he was so aggressive that either he'd tear the field apart and win or pull everyone after him so they'd blow by him at the end. Lance qualified for and competed in the Junior World Champs in Moscow in 1989. This was to prove to be his breakout year. He got more attention than others because of his aggressive racing style. He broke away from the main group in the first lap, riding in the front peloton, and was right up there until the final thrust, where stronger riders pushed ahead of him. His performance at Moscow marked Armstrong as the most exciting new cyclist on the world stage. He showed himself to be an aggressive competitor with the ability to focus like a laser beam on achieving his goals. He was supremely confident, which was easy to read as arrogance. He also had no interest in riding as a part of a team. He didn't want anything to detract him from his desire to cross the finish line first. It was in 1992 that Armstrong competed at his first Olympics in Barcelona. He later recalled that he rode miserably as an inexperienced hothead and finished a disappointing 14th in the road race. His performance, however, it was enough to bring him to the attention of the director of a professional sports team that was sponsored by Motorola. After the games, Lance was signed on to the team, which officially made him a professional athlete. Under the Motorola banner, Lance travelled to Europe in order to compete in a series of road races. His first race was in San Sebastian, Spain, and he came in dead last. The crowd jeered at him when he crossed the line 30 minutes after the winner. Armstrong was deflated after this race, and he considered flying back to the United States, but his coach convinced him to stay and prove himself, and prove to his teammates that he was no quitter, and so, well, Lance stayed on. From race to race, he got better, and he came in second at the Zurich Championships, finally telling himself that he was capable of doing this. One of Lance's biggest challenges with Motorola was learning to work as part of a cycling team. He would quickly get frustrated with the other riders in his peloton, yelling at them to pull or get out of the way. Competitors would try to frustrate him on purpose, encouraging him to take the lead and wear himself out early. After only 12 months as a professional cyclist, Lance had already earned the nickname The King. At the 1993 UCI Track Cycling World Championship in Oslo, Norway, the Motorola team decided that he was ready to take the title, and they would work with him to win the race. Rather than rushing to the lead, he stayed in the peloton until the second to last lap, as he had been instructed to do. Then he attacked to take the lead and stay there. He crossed the line well ahead of the competition, and he bowed to the crowd, blew kisses, and, in what was to become his trademark, he pointed to the sky. Armstrong, he was now the world champion, but to truly be the best, he knew that he had to win the Tour de France. In 1995, he won a stage of the world's greatest race, dedicating the win to a teammate who had died during a crash in that very race. In August of 1996, he signed a 2-year contract with the Cofidis cycling team in France. In 1996, Lance noticed that his right testicle was becoming swollen. This was followed by a dull ache and then a lack of energy. This affected his performance at the 96 Olympics, and he had a disappointing finish. In his memoirs, he recalled that he felt like he was dragging a manhole cover during the road race. In October, after returning from the Olympics, Armstrong was diagnosed with testicular cancer. He had put off seeing a doctor, but when he began coughing up blood, he knew that he had to act. The news, it rocked Armstrong, as well as his support team. He was 25, an elite athlete, and had stage 3 testicular cancer that had spread to his brain, his lungs, and his abdomen. His chances of survival were estimated to be below 50%, and it looked pretty likely that he would never race again, despite recently signing a $2.5 million contract with Cofidis. His team's lawyers decided that they would not provide insurance cover during his treatment, as the condition had not been advised at the time of the signing of the contract. There were sponsors, however, who did not abandon Armstrong during his time of need. Oakley even offered for him to be covered under their health plan. Armstrong took on the cancer challenge with the same fierce determination that had made him a world champion. He underwent a program of intense chemotherapy treatment. He sought out and began treatment with a very caustic chemo cocktail known as VIP, which was less damaging on the lungs than conventional treatment. This choice, it probably saved his cycling career. Throughout his chemo treatment, Armstrong competed sporadically. Understandably, he did not do well, but he was keeping himself in the game. The final chemo treatment, it took place on December 13th, 1996. And in February of 1997, his doctors were able to confirm that his cancer was in full remission. Armstrong returned to competitive cycling at the beginning of 1998. His contract with Cofidis had been cancelled in 1997, and he had signed on with the US Postal Service cycling team. He moved to Europe with the team to train for the Tour de France. Armstrong was now recognized as the poster child for being a cancer survivor. He received many awards and many titles. Throughout 1998, he built successes one upon another, and he steadily improved his placings. That year, he also married his fiancée, Kristen Richard. The marriage would last 5 years, and it would produce 3 children. Armstrong won his first Tour de France in 1999. He won 4 stages and had learned to work well with his teammates. He finished the race 7 minutes and 37 seconds ahead of the second-place finisher. In a post-win interview, he proclaimed, "If you get a second chance at life for something, go all the way." In 2000, Armstrong came back to France, determined to defend his title. The race turned out to be a battle between him and Jan Ullrich, who had competed the previous year. This rivalry was to continue for the next 5 years. Armstrong crossed the finish line 6 minutes ahead of Ullrich to become a two-time champion. Armstrong dominated the cycling world in the early 2000s. His consecutive run of Tour de France victories stretched on to an unprecedented 7 in a row from 1999 to 2005. Following his July 24, 2005 win, he announced his retirement from competitive cycling. In the wake of his stunning 1999 Tour de France victory, there were allegations that Armstrong must have been involved in either drug-taking or blood doping. In early 2000, under the auspices of the Nike Corporation, he created a documentary-style advertisement entitled Body in order to answer the detractors. The film focused on his steely will to win and showed footage of him undergoing drug tests. The voiceover narration, it was done by Armstrong himself. At one point he says, "Everybody wants to know what I'm on. What am I on? I'm on my bike, busting my ass 6 hours a day. What are you on?" When results came through that he had tested positive for a minute amount of corticosteroid after the 99 Tour de France, many people doubled down on their accusations. But the amounts in his body were so minute that they were not enough to fail the test. Since that one little blip, he has never failed a drug test. There has, however, been quite a lot of circumstantial evidence. In 2004, a book was published called LA Confidential, which claimed that Armstrong had been using performance-enhancing drugs. It quoted from Steve Swart, a former Motorola teammate, who claimed that all the team members were using as far back as 1995. When allegations made in the book were reprinted in the British newspaper The Sunday Times, Armstrong sued them, leading to an out-of-court settlement. In June of 2012, the US anti-doping agency brought allegations against Armstrong of running a huge doping ring among his teammates during his competitive career. They were armed with testimony from a number of former teammates. Their goal was to have him banned from any sport that followed the World Anti-Doping Code. Lance, he did not appeal the ban. Armstrong continued to vehemently deny the allegations of doping until 2013. Then, in a bombshell interview with Oprah Winfrey, he admitted that he had used performance-enhancing drugs for all of his Tour de France wins. He claimed to have used erythropoietin and human growth hormone and to have engaged in blood doping. The reaction? It was one of outrage. Parties began lining up to sue Armstrong, including teammates that he had called liars and parties that he had won libel suits against. The US Justice Department sued him for millions of dollars that the US Postal Service had spent on sponsorship. The World Cycling Governing Body issued a lifetime ban to Armstrong. He still competes in amateur events, however. Today, he owns a coffee shop in Austin, Texas, and a bike shop called Mellow Johnny's. Though he will never shake the reputation as the world's greatest cycling cheat, he has built a life for himself that allows him to indulge his cycling passion and his competitive nature as an amateur athlete. Following his successful cancer treatment, Armstrong started the Lance Armstrong Foundation. It began with a fundraising race to raise money for cancer research. One of the most successful initiatives of the foundation was the production in 2004 of a silicone band imprinted with the words Livestrong. Over 80 million of these bracelets have been sold worldwide. So I really hope you enjoyed that episode of Biographics. If you did, there's a couple of things you could do right now. One is hit that like button below. Also, if you want more stuff like this, we put out brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday. So hit that subscribe button below. And subscribe button doesn't do what it used to on YouTube. If you actually want to get a notification about these videos, please do hit that bell button next to the subscribe button, and that'll send you a notification every time, every Monday and Thursday when we put out a new video. Also, if you want to watch something else right now, stuff from the archive, over there on the right. And as always, thank you for watching.